With me today we have Daniel Newman, CEO of Futurum Group. Great to have you here with us. Thank you for coming from Austin.
Yeah.
Maybe just to get the conversation started for today, as today's theme is about product. And always people ask, well, what's a good product? But I like to ask, what makes a product go from good to great? What differentiates great products from good products?
Yeah, well, just as a bit of a background for you and everybody out there, our firm works closely with about 600 of the world's most prolific tech companies. And
Right.
that spans what I would say 14 adjacencies from chips to SaaS.
Right.
And so to us, design means a lot of things because you have design of services, you have design of user experiences, and you have hard product design. Right. And obviously we're seeing a pretty big shift where design used to be very centric to things we could touch and feel. How is a
Right.
clothing designed, or how is the handsets designed?
Right.
And now we really do think about think of an iPhone or a smartphone.
Right.
Design is of course the device. Design is for sustainability. Design is most recently for artificial intelligence.
Right.
Design is also for battery life.
Right.
And so what I would say about what makes designs go from good to great is when they go from solving maybe one significant problem to being able to solve a significant problem and all of the corresponding
Right.
problems and opportunities that need to have a complete ecosystem. And so I guess being tech-centric, my bias lies a little bit that way, but the design itself is advancing through a number of different experiences that we may have with one product. And I think the technology era has really, really changed what design means.
Right. And when you think of a product and how we define products, as you mentioned, so much is changing about the design aspect of it. But coming at it from a customer standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, from a user standpoint, what are attributes of a phenomenal product that differentiate itself from, say, a good product, an average product, but like doing it from the lens of not just the maker, but the user?
I think a product starts to stand out when it truly differentiates from what else is available in the market. So, for instance, you look at the problems that an EV has been trying to solve,
Right.
the design of an EV. I mean, EVs look like cars.
Right.
And for the average person that maybe doesn't closely follow automotive, they would look at a Tesla and they would look at a Honda and they'd say, I see a car.
Yeah.
But what has taken the Tesla, in my opinion, from being a product that stood out as great in a category of a lot of cars are good enough, has been a combination of two things. It solved a significant challenge in terms of what we're trying to do worldwide with sustainability.
Right.
But concurrently, it created a user experience that took all kinds of clumsy ergonomics, right? The button panels and the uses and where's this thing and where's that thing. And now you have one single touch panel that feels a heck of a lot like an iPad.
Right.
That now you can intuitively get after all of the different functions, whether it's driving functions, whether it's comfort functions, whether it's infotainment functions.
Right.
So they've taken a good concept, which is button panels everywhere. You got your AC, your infotainment, you've got your controls and cruise and everything, and now you have a single interface. And by the way, it's advancing very quickly by taking into consideration how we search. We used to search through a series of recommendations and filtering systems, and now we are searching through voice command.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very holistic. So that's an example, but you could take that into any category.
Right.
And say, we go from good to great by making these iterations that are what the consumers want, but not necessarily always what they know they want.
Yep.
But helping them discover that, and then eventually you're filling a need.
So let's maybe peel that a little bit, right? The famous, I think it's Henry Ford's quote of, if you ask the consumer, they'll ask for a faster horse.
Yes.
Right? How do you bridge the gap when you think that you have a breakthrough on your hand, when it's a product or you believe it's a breakthrough, but the market is either not receptive currently or they are not fully aware of the values that you're bringing, because you're basically trying to revolutionize something, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to change the mindset. Like, what are some examples that come to mind? And how do you believe you can bridge that gap between we believe this is the right product for you to what they think they need at the time?
Yeah, I think a great example of this is how saw the technological adoption flip from commercial-driven technologies ending up with consumers to consumer-focused technologies ending up in commercial. And I'll give you the for instance, and I often share this, but there was a time that Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer was recorded on camera laughing at the idea of an iPhone.
Right.
And basically, do you remember what he said about it?
He said, well, I happened to work at Motorola at the time, so
Okay.
I actually remember exactly what he said, because he said, A, costs too much, and he doesn't have a keyboard.
Yep. He
So
said
he doesn't
nobody
appeal.
will send emails on a touch screen.
Yep.
And I think when you look back, that was probably one of the biggest misses in history. And so, that's kind of in my mind, though, the example of, a product that did have an audience that, by the way, the incumbents did not believe had an audience. But there was something in, Apple is a little cliche when we use it as an example in design or marketing, but they also understood through consumerization that they didn't have to win in enterprises at first. If you remember, very early on, many of us, I was one of them, stuck to my BlackBerry. I loved my BlackBerry. By the way, in its era, a wonderful design.
Yes.
Having said that, when we saw, sort of internet and compute go to the device, that particular design and those ergonomics were not very conducive to a full immersive web experience. It was great when you were doing a couple of things, right? When you needed email, messaging, and maybe some very lightweight search. But when you were moving to a full app-driven era, it completely changed. But what happened was IT departments liked BlackBerry. They were very secure.
Yes.
They had, they were very well managed. The mobile management was great. But in the end, what drove the iPhone into enterprises everywhere, now when you go in, yes, there are Samsungs and it's globally, but even Android was still a byproduct ultimately of the iOS.
Yes.
What drove it into the enterprise? I'll answer that because I'm the one that's supposed to be answering the questions. But in the end, it was CEOs were walking into the IT office and say, I don't want to use this anymore. My wife has this, my kids have these things.
Right.
I want this. And then what happened was the entire world, from consumers to enterprises, had to conform use.
Right.
And we've seen that happen. So sometimes you have to be really good at creating market fit. And sometimes the market you may ultimately realize is your biggest opportunity isn't the first market you land in, because you have to create that inertia of demand. And I think that's what happened in that particular example is,
Great example.
the market grew into it.
Right. And, as we look at companies, so you have companies that design and innovation is in their DNA. You use Tesla, you use Apple.
Relatable.
Where have you seen, or what have you seen as some of the recipes for transforming the DNA of companies that, while they do design, they do product, they make good products, but they haven't yet, done, they haven't crossed the chasm of, the chasm of, innovation, becoming an innovation and innovative centric DNA, and what are some of the challenges you've seen these companies who are, often actually been around for a long time, are facing in basically making the transition to again becoming a great innovator and a great challenger in the market?
I think one of the biggest roadblocks that these companies run into is they become very complacent in the market and the revenue streams and the business, and they become a bit risk off. So when you're building a company and initially getting to scale, you are very risk on.
Right.
You are willing to disrupt, you're willing to do things no one else is willing to do, you're willing to take chances, you're willing to break things and fail fast.
Right.
And as I wrote 7 books about this, and one of them called Future Proof. I spent a lot of time focusing on that process of breaking stuff and moving quickly, and bigger companies become more resistant to that. And so all the great stories in history, and again, staying on the relatable, but you hear stories going back about Kodak. And you hear stories back going about Xerox, and you hear stories going back about BlackBerry, I've already mentioned. You hear stories going back about Blockbuster Video. All these companies had a tremendous business with great customers, a lot of loyalty, and they only were really stopped by someone that sat in the most senior offices of their company that just fundamentally did not believe there would be a disruption that could take them down. There's great quotes from the CEO of Blockbuster effectively talking about, did you know that the CEO of Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
$50 million.
But at the same time, Netflix would have probably not been created if they would have bought that.
Well, if anything, it probably would have been bought the way,
Just
was it
tuck it in.
GoPro was bought by, was it Cisco that bought it? And
I think so, and it resold it out.
And then basically, though, it's died,
Yeah.
and we see that happen a lot. Is like, it's just trying to avoid the innovation of and disruption of their own business, and of course that's part of the reason that there's all kinds of regulation about
Yeah.
big companies being able to acquire,
Right.
because they're not always acquiring to gain a market advantage. Sometimes they're acquiring just to
Defensive
defensively.
Yeah.
But having said that, at the time, had they made the investment, bought Netflix for what seems like a song at this point. I mean,
Right.
their stock, the value of the company changes more than that day to day with stock fluctuation. They may have had the chance to have survived. If Kodak had some of the most innovative, disruptive digital capabilities on the planet, remember, because there was an era between film and phones,
Right.
where digital cameras was a big business.
Yeah.
And Kodak largely missed that industry, that opportunity to lead that industry, because they were playing defense of film. And so while these are sort of well understood and well documented examples, this is truer and truer. But the difference now, even from then, is the law of diffusion of innovation is shorter. It's
Right.
more condensed than it's ever been before. So we used to have 10-year disruption periods for a lot of industries, and then there's 5-year disruption periods. You look at like generative AI, large language models have
Right.
already been commoditized.
Right.
They are largely commoditized. They don't sell, or they're available at some level for free to most people. They're open sourced and accessible for developers to use. And commercialization is going to be left with only a handful of companies that will
Right.
be able to monetize them. That was a major technological breakthrough in November of 22, that by May of 2024, you can somewhat say that model within itself,
Right.
without the entanglement of proprietary data, specialized application development, in enterprise software integrations, is already somewhat business obsolete. So CEOs, again, if you're in the clothing design business, there is maybe a longer cycle, but even that, because of the the proliferation of internet, fashion cycles are shorter.
Right.
They get out on Instagram, they become fashion, in the moment, and then the people that are the influencers and the leaders and the models in the market, they don't want to be the same as everyone else. So they're going to move on to the next trend, and people are going to follow them. So if
Right.
you're a designer, your design cycles may have gone from a year or a seasonal to multi times in the
Right.
same season, just to stay in front of a trend line.